Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
As drone operations expand, regulation could easily fragment across the FAA, the Department of Homeland Security, Defense, and others. Instead, there's growing coordination to manage both safety and security across that system. Katie Inman, a partner at Holland and Knight, walks us through how that's taking shape. Katie, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry, for having me.
There's some interesting regulation happening right now around drones, both from the FAA and the FCC. What's driving the urgency at this particular moment?
Yes, great question. I think a number of things. We saw roughly a year ago the president issue a couple of executive orders that really prompted some momentum, and we've seen that momentum throughout this past year, and we will continue to see it, I think, in the upcoming months. From the FAA side and the FCC side, we're seeing a common theme, and that's security, national security. We're seeing concerns, and the federal government's very, forthright with that, saying, hey, we're concerned and we want to be sure that we've got the appropriate risk mitigations in place.
Drones have typically been treated as commercial technology. What has changed in the environment that is now bringing that security concern front and center?
Well, there's still very much commercial technology and, just wonderful innovative solutions. We've seen over the years drones being used for avalanche control and for weather research and search and rescue, just a number of wonderful tools that, a number of wonderful uses and law enforcement using them as a tool as well. But I think that really it's just law enforcement and national security coming together and saying, wait a minute, these technological innovations and these tools can be used very negatively. I think the federal government's known that for a while now, but I think just recent international activities and whatnot have maybe prompted a little bit more concern.
And the FAA and the FCC seem like really different sides of the drone issue. How do their roles fit together here?
Well, that's a great question and a great observation. You're right. FAA and FCC both very much have a role in drone regulation. And the reason for that is because the FAA is authorized and responsible for ensuring safety in the national airspace system, the entire national airspace system. The management of that system and the safety oversight of it belongs to the FAA, unquestionably, whereas the FCC oversees the spectrum and communications side of radio frequency devices. And of course, I'm using a lot of terms here and somewhat boiling it down, but please just be assured that anytime a radio frequency device wants to operate or the objective is to import it or use it or market it, in the U.S., that radio frequency device is going to need an equipment authorization, and the operation of it will need to occur on an appropriate spectrum. And there are two types, licensed or unlicensed. And so in that regard, FCC really oversees the communications side, which is very important. Whereas the FAA oversees airspace safety. The two very much converge when it comes to drones. And the FAA and the FCC work very well together in ensuring that both of the agencies are really, getting to their best of their responsibilities, and they're delivering on their objectives here. And not contradicting one another. Because the roles are so different, we see an absence of contradiction, of course, we see them working very well together in my experience.
And Katie, some of these authorities that are being captured in this new rulemaking have been sitting there for years. Why are they really just now coming together?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I believe we are discussing the Section 2209 rulemaking from the 2016 statute called the FAA Extension Safety and Security Act. You're right. That's been a long time coming. The president mentioned it in his last year's executive order. And then, of course, folks have been talking about it for quite some time. I don't know exactly what the holdup was. In my experience at the FAA, I know that it was very much an objective and a goal that the agency was trying to deliver on. And as with anything, you can see challenges that can come up. But here, what that Section 2209 did was require the FAA to issue rules to establish a process for restricting drone flights over critical infrastructure. So the definition of critical infrastructure really posed a lot of challenges for the FAA. And in this proposed rule, the comments for which are due July 6th, the FAA seeks to define critical infrastructure using an existing statute and then proposing a process for folks to say, hey, I think I have critical infrastructure here. I fit within one of 16 sectors that's in the FAA's proposed rule. And I'm going to go through the process and try to get my critical infrastructure site named to be part of a UAFR, which is Unmanned Aircraft Flight Restricted Area. There are two types of those, a special and a standard. The standard one is going to be one of those 16 areas and really functions as sort of a no trespassing sign, some folks have said. So the drone is not going to be allowed to enter into this area without first giving notification to the critical infrastructure owner or proprietor. And then the second is a little bit more exclusive, special UAFR. And for that one, drone operations would largely be prohibited unless you receive affirmative permission to get in that area. And it likely will be pretty narrow permission. So that's a proposed rule that's out there right now for comment. You can see the public comments on the public docket, and those are very worthwhile. Review of those is very worthwhile. I think it's a good idea to stay involved and submit a comment if you'd like to have your voice heard on that. But that is a proposed rule that's currently under development right now. But Terry, there are other things too that FAA has done or is in the process of doing related to drones and security as well. They've got the beyond visual line of sight rulemaking that they proposed last fall. And comment period is closed on that, but we expect to see some sort of movement on it relatively soon, I think. But I'm mentioning that within the context of security because it's worthwhile to note that the FAA is not the only agency that proposed this rule. It's a joint rule between the FAA and the TSA from the Department of Homeland Security. So you've got both sets of authority coming together to allow for, or propose to allow for, drones that are pretty heavy, weighing up to 1,320 pounds is the proposal, to operate beyond visual line of sight. And of course, security vetting from the TSA would be required in many circumstances. And then right now, as we speak, we've seen some security measures come out just recently from FAA that are in effect right now. And these have to do with establishing temporary flight restrictions over the FIFA World Cup locations. And there are a number of those, of course, and very stiff penalties that the FAA is warning about. So FAA is taking a really wholesome approach, I guess I should say, a really comprehensive approach to making sure that it's addressing the security needs. And at the same time, FCC has done other things as well to address security measures. It's, got the covered list, which is a list of entities in which equipment authorizations are not going to be allowed, so that, drones will not be able to get an equipment authorization for a new model of a UAS for which it would need an equipment authorization if that drone is produced overseas or contains critical components that are foreign produced. So that's a really robust security measure as well that we see. So in addition to what we've seen most recently with the 2209 rulemaking and the FCC request for comments, in their public notice regarding just modernizing obsolete regulations, we've seen these other ongoing, very recent measures as well. So we're seeing a really comprehensive approach here for drone security.
Katie Inman is a partner at Holland and Knight. Katie, that is a great rundown of sort of all the different aspects of the drone regulation space right now. Something that you said as you walked through that really triggered an image in my mind, that you talked about a no trespassing sign, and I'm imagining that in the air and thinking about how that would actually play out. If you take all of those rules together, what does that really change for operations, drone operators, and what they might do with these and how they might use them in practice?
Oh, thank you, Terry. That's a great question because in practical terms, what should people do to address the changing landscape that we have here with drones? And my number one recommendation would be just know what you're doing. Check before you go. Don't just fly a drone up there thinking, this is no big deal. I'm just having fun. No, there are many rules that apply to that drone operation, whether it's Part 107, whether you're recreational, what have you. The drone needs to be registered unless it's extremely lightweight, at a minimum. And other capabilities need to be on it normally, such as remote identification, which would allow the FAA to obtain information from that drone as it's operating and know who the drone is registered to. So that's an additional security measure. But and then, of course, checking for the temporary flight restrictions and those zones. The wonderful thing about drone operations right now is that a number of apps are available, and the FAA keeps a very great website on this called Before You Fly. And so just checking that website and educating yourself, making sure you know what you're doing before you get out there I just can't emphasize that enough. And then, of course, if you're a drone operator who wants to make your voice heard, there are a number of ways to do that, making sure that you know what rules are being proposed and commenting on them. That's the beauty of the Administrative Procedure Act. So folks can really get involved in the conversation very easily. But overall, in practical terms, when it comes to operating, I would suggest just staying very much involved and on top of things like the Before You Fly website that FAA puts out, and just tracking as many updates as you can, especially before you operate.
And as you've described it, the universe that's concerned about these is everything from the individual recreational drone pilot to commercial drone operators to the owners and operators of this critical infrastructure. What pulls them all together sort of into a unified communication space?
If they have all common goals, such as making sure that drone operations can occur, making sure that, innovation is not curtailed, but at the same time, drones are able to safely and securely operate, I think almost everybody can get behind that mission. Of course, you're going to have some bad actors out there, and the federal government appears to be doing a great job on making sure that they're halting any sorts of concerns in that regard. But for those of us who are drone operators or care about, drone development here, regardless of whether they're a critical infrastructure owner or a drone operator themselves or a manufacturer, I think we can all get around the one common goal of making sure drones are safe. They're not posing a threat to other aircraft in the national airspace system. That common mission will bring everyone together.
Katie Inman is a partner at Holland and Knight. Katie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Terry. It's been my pleasure.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.